We're gonna start the governance study in 30 seconds. Yay! Hi. The governance study public meeting will start in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. We're gonna start. Yeah. We're gonna start the governance study in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, we're gonna start. Okay, we're gonna start in 30 seconds. Down. In 30 seconds, if you'll take your seat and please make sure to have signed in. Phone work. Can you hear me? This microphone, can you hear me in the background? Yeah.
The handheld's better, Meg. I think it's louder.
That is just trying to get that up a little higher.
Okay.
Plus, if I do, if I have to do this, you have to do it.
Because you're loud too, Sarah. Okay, is this any better?
Yeah.
How about in the back? Can you hear me in the back, Michelle? Yeah. Okay, great. I'm gonna use this. And we are going to kick off the second of 3 public meetings for the Big Sky Governance Study. Again, if you didn't sign in yet, please do. We put your name into our subscription list, and then you will receive our monthly email updates. Welcome to this second public meeting, and thank you very much for being here. We do have a contingent on Zoom. Jenny, how many do we have so far?
About 10 to 12. It's flux. People are still rolling in.
So we have double digits on Zoom. That's fantastic. And we appreciate them streaming in. My name is Meg O'Leary, and I am the Community Engagement and Stakeholder Outreach Person for the Big Sky Governance Study. To my left is Dylan Pevenich with WGM Group. He came down from Butte today. And to his left is the Echo Northwest team, Sarah Emmons and Leanne Ryan. They flew in from Seattle today. Couple things. I want to thank them, the 3 of them, for traveling as far as they did to come up to you tonight. And I want to personally thank Jenny Christensen for being our AV support Zoom crew and everything else that she does to support this effort. Also, thank you to the Wilson for what you've done to help us get this organized. The goal of tonight's gathering is threefold. Number 1, we're going to present current findings on service providers and fiscal conditions. Number 2, we will present potential governance options for the future based on engagement, considerations, and research. Number 3, we will introduce the survey and provide context to
You want your full.
for that survey. The meeting is going to last 1 hour from when I started it. I'm gonna be the timer. And so that means it's going to officially last until 6:38. Give us 2 more minutes, so 6:40 p.m. We will then have an optional 30-minute breakout sessions. The agenda is, we'll hand it to Dylan when I'm done, and he will spend 5 minutes going over his current findings from WGM Group. We'll then hand it to the Echo team, and they will, for 10 minutes, go over their findings on fiscal conditions. We know that it's really important to kick right out of the gate with engagement, so we'll pause and we'll ask you questions, and we will take questions from Zoom as well. We'll pick back up with more information from Dylan, and at 6:10 or 6:12, we will break this thing and we will open it up to Q&A with this audience. So please be ready. I know many of you are ready with questions, and we're very interested in hearing those and talking about them. We'll also take questions from Zoom. Okay, that was the agenda. The main objective tonight is to share this information with you, to get it in your hands, to get you thinking about it. The second objective is to hear from you. So that's why we allowed for 30 minutes in this section to go for it. Oh, sorry, back to the agenda to wrap that last half hour up. At 6:40, the meeting will officially end. We'll end the streaming. So those of you that aren't on Zoom, please take a look at our website and feed us questions through that our overarching email. And we will have all of this in the summary report. And this meeting is being recorded and will be put on the website. We're also, of course, taking notes. And like I said, I'll be the timer. When we do this breakout session at the 6:40 to 7:10 timeline, we'll take these two tables. We'll have the ECHO team on one side, the WGM team on another side, and I'll be in that back corner. And we will do a 10-minute, 3 stations, 10 minutes each, and I'll announce the rotation. That's where you're gonna be able to really get into the specifics. Okay. Dylan, you're up. You can sit there or you can stand here, whatever is most comfortable for you. Please introduce yourself and give us a tidbit about yourself or something that you learned about Big Sky that you didn't know. And I'll start the clock now.
Thank you, Meg. Dylan Pipnich of Land Planner at WGM Group. Kind of running out of these tidbit things, but about 6 or 7. I'm from Butte. My background is a municipal land planner. I was planning director for Butte Silver Bowl for a number of years, and switched over to the private side to do some good. Tidbit that I've been saying, there's a lot of familiar faces out in the audience, so I'm sorry if you've heard this, but I'm a Montana State University graduate, and Big Sky put me through college. I worked in the Yellowstone Club of Construction for 6 years, so it's a go through undergrad. Then it paid for my education and then some. So it's been interesting to come back up here and see how it's changed since in those 20 years, and to see all the amazing things that you've accomplished. And yeah, it's still a great place, and it's amazing what you've accomplished so far. Meg's kind of introduced the team here. So that's us. So the things that we're going to talk about tonight, what have we been doing since September? Third week of September, we were here and we had the first public engagement meeting. And we met with a lot of, we were calling them service providers. There are a lot of government-esque foundations and districts that provide services. And we quickly realized that Big Sky should get in place. What we did since then is we compiled this existing conditions report that is basically the baseline for the governance study, and it's how things operate in Big Sky now. And we're going to get that out to everybody. That'll be available on the website. We'll get it out in the newsletter. The links will all be there. And it's quite lengthy. We have an executive summary style where you can people read it, but if you want to dive into the details, all the details are there for sure. And that existing conditions report covers existing governance, the existing fiscal landscape, and it does forecasting and trends, because it's important to us that we understand, where Big Sky's going, not just where you're at. And then it does a real in-depth evaluation of Montana code, state statute, and other considerations. So that you're aware of any hurdles or any, avenues, paths forward allowed by current state statute. And that's that report, that's what we're gonna be introducing tonight. Other than that, Meg's kept us very busy with public engagement. Been operating the website, newsletters, she's doing office hours. A couple weeks ago, I was here for a week and we did some scenario toolkit building, and that was kind of an educational workshop platform that, was intended to help people understand some of the options, some of the availabilities, maybe learn some of the things that, we're gonna be evaluating the final report, and those went real well. And before that, we did the Tuesday series, we came up here several Tuesdays in a row. We've been really valuing those smaller in-person, getting to know the community engagement sessions. And of course, Meg's goes to all the board games, doesn't let anybody forget about government studies, so that's a good thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the existing governance framework, and like I said, we quickly realized that it's very complicated. Obviously, when we started the project, we knew that Big Sky's, it's a census designated place that lies within 2 counties. And then you start diving in to the actual service providers and governance of Big Sky, and it gets very complicated very fast. This is a map that shows a bunch of those district boundaries and service providers and boundaries. And you can see that none of them really align. So we met with a bunch of these service providers in September, and these are all included in the report. And I'm just gonna rattle off a long list so that you can understand who's all there. It's Big Sky Housing Trust, Big Sky Medical Center, Big Sky Discovery Academy, Water and Sewer District, Camp Transportation District, Moonlight Basin, Community Foundation, Big Sky Public Library, the Owners Association, Fire Department, Sheriff's Office, Visco Biz Trip, Morningstar Learning Center, Chamber of Commerce, School District, Wellness in Action, Yellowstone Club Community Foundation, Warren Miller Performing Arts Center, Big Sky Sustainability Network Organization, Food Bank, Girl Wild, Arts Council, and Vivo Big Sky. That's 20 some different service providers and entities that are providing some form of local government function or service providing to the community. And we detail those in depth in the report to get a baseline. So next, the ECHO team is going to talk about, general funding in Big Sky, kind of property taxes, costs, the property taxes that are generated, where some of that's spent. And that's another key element to this existing conditions, this creating this baseline for the governance side. So yeah, Sarah.
Great.
Thanks. Better you to talk again, or should I just take it away?
Just make sure you give us a tidbit.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Emmons, and I'm a consultant. I'm from Philadelphia. I saw that sheep sat here, so go birds, by way of Olympia, Washington. And I'm here tonight as part of the ECHO Northwest team. I spent most of my career in state and local government finance, in and out of the public sector. Most recently, I was the deputy CFO of a human services agency working for the state of Washington. I worked in the state legislature there, in the Pennsylvania Treasury, and my local government experience is mostly in Virginia. But I do have a lot of experience working on consulting projects in, actually with the Legislative Fiscal Office here in Montana, as well as some resort and tourism communities across the Mountain and Pacific Northwest. So nothing like Big Sky. This place is really incredible. And my tidbit, this always seems to get a reaction, is that I have 5 kids. That seems to make people's eyebrows go up. Unfortunately, 3 of them are basketball players, despite my vertical challenge. So we don't do a lot of skiing in the winter. And Leanne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne Ryan. I'm a senior project manager at Echo Northwest. I'm based out of our Seattle office. I primarily work on housing. It pulls me into the municipal finance world like every 2 years. And before I got in kind of the public policy world, I studied architecture, I was in civil engineering, and now I'm in public policy because all of that was really hard. So, yeah, so happy to be in Big Sky. It's a beautiful area.
Okay, well, we're gonna talk tonight about the most boring title ever, Big Sky tax structure and public service funding. I'm hopefully gonna tell you some information that you don't already know, and if not, we just wrote Jack's headline, the consultant tells the community things they already know. We've spent a lot of time today just trying to understand how public services are provided here, where your tax dollars are going, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. So we're here to answer two key questions. The first is how are public and community services in Big Sky funded. As you know, they're not all provided by public service entities. And the two main revenue streams that fund these services are property tax and resort tax. So we're going to talk a lot about those today. But also thanks to the innovation of this community, there are many other public and private funding streams that also play a part in this kind of patchwork of the fiscal landscape, and Leanne's going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. So if you're a property owner here, you probably know your property taxes support public services in Big Sky. They also pay for a lot of services outside of Big Sky too. So we're going to have some numbers to show you about that as well. It's especially true on the Madison County side. And the role that resort tax plays in public services is that it offsets property taxes here. So it does probably play a role in kind of keeping them lower in the Big Sky area. It also allows for some dollars to be, or for a lot of dollars to be locally reinvested. So it's a nice balance to that redistributive nature of the property tax, and we'll talk about that. And then the other question we're going to be answering is who pays for public services here? So the nice thing about the resort tax and actually property tax is just given the change in kind of residential homeownership here in Big Sky, both revenue streams really do extract revenues from tourists, visitors, and second homeowners. So we have some numbers for those. Excuse me, I'm not going to try. It's the altitude for the crowd. Oops. One more note on that. Resort tax is becoming more balanced across county lines. So that just reflects some changes in development. Okay, so property taxes. Just to warn you, we have a lot of charts to go through. Hopefully I don't go too fast. So this is a chart that shows the growth in taxable values in Gallatin and Madison counties. Big Sky happens to straddle two very high growth counties, or it's playing a role in that growth as well. So on the Gallatin County side, taxable value has tripled between 2015 and 2024. And on the Madison County side, it's quadrupled, and Big Sky definitely has played a very large role in that growth. If you're a property owner here, you know that taxes went up quite a bit locally and statewide between 22 and 23, and you can see that jump there. That's part of the statewide trend, but it was really especially prevalent in areas like Big Sky that saw kind of the housing boom that happened during and after COVID. And a lot of that burden has fallen on residential property owners, and that's just part of the nature of the appraisal cycle and some other kind of statutory realities that in Montana, you probably are also aware that there are a couple of bills in the state legislature that I think are aiming at residential property tax relief. So we're going to treat our analysis kind of current law, until it's not, and then we'll have conversations about what that looks like. But growth is definitely huge in Big Sky. Next slide. So I mentioned that the growth in taxable value in Madison County especially is in large part due to Big Sky, and I'm hoping that this chart really makes that point. So here on the left we have a map that shows the two counties and then the Big Sky Resort Area District, which does not levy a property tax. But we're using it for our study area for property tax purposes because, as Dylan mentioned and you saw from his map, the property tax landscape is very complicated in this area. You have a lot of different sized and different shaped and non-contiguous districts. And so this is just really the easiest way to show kind of how much taxable value really is in this area. So on the Madison County side in 2024, and I'm sorry, we got these data from the Department of Revenue, so this is our analysis of their parcel data and county assessor data. On the Madison County side, taxable value is shown, it's green in my remembrance, but it kind of looks like navy blue here. That's the dark color there, so it's about 85% of taxable value on the Madison County side is in Big Sky by our estimate. And that orange sliver just shows you the amount of taxable value that's outside of this resort area. Despite the relatively small geographic area that it makes up within Madison County. On the Gallatin County side, it's about 14%. So the Gallatin County side, it's 104 million out of 746 million. Still probably a little bit disproportionate, but just not as extreme as on the Madison County side. And that's of course because Gallatin County also has Bozeman and a lot more development and more urban areas. So this slide shows you really how much of a role Big Sky plays in the property tax. It's also gonna, in the growth of property taxes, it also was gonna tell you a lot about who's paying property taxes on each side of the county. So this picture gets a little more complicated. Now what we're looking at are property tax levies that are, so these are tax revenues collected by districts that tax within the Big Sky area. So the map here is very complicated and I hope you can spend more time with it, when the report comes out. This is like the property tax version of what Dylan showed in his slide. So you can see that 85% figure that I mentioned on the taxable value really does apply to all the levies here, including the countywide levies. So those larger bars are the county levies, countywide school equalization, and statewide levies for whatever the state is levying for. Big Sky is paying a lot of those taxes, about 85% by our estimate. And that's really disproportionate when you think about the kind of small geographic concentration. Of the taxing entities that are shown here, the bottom one, Big Sky Rural Fire, Big Sky Fire District is the district that collects taxes that are then reinvested in the area. So again, this is a map, or this chart is showing you where taxes are coming from, not necessarily where they're spent. And then this is the kind of the Gallatin County view. And again, that 14% of taxable value is going to apply to countywide levies that are collected countywide, but the green part is from property owners in BizRed. On the Gallatin County side, a little bit more, there are a few more local taxing districts that are kind of reinvesting dollars here in the Big Sky community. Notably on this slide, you see Big Sky K-12, which serves this area, and Big Sky Fire District. So a little bit more, relatively speaking, of those property taxes are then spent back in the community. So we talked about kind of the overall levy picture, and then I mentioned earlier we were going to talk a little bit about primary versus residential, or primary resident versus second home or vacation homeowners. So we did a kind of a scrub of the 6,000 odd residential parcels that the Department of Revenue provided us. We used property tax rebate addresses from folks who received property tax, the program that the state had last year for primary residents. And we did some scrubbing of addresses, just trying to match up, where folks' property tax bill might not match the primary resident, made some assumptions. And we got a sample of about 3,000 parcels out of the 6,000, so a decent size, to try to look at what the average market or average taxable value was between the difference between primary homeowners and second homeowners. So the blue columns here are owner occupied. If you look across Big Sky, the average market value is 2.1 million. So this is again owner occupied. But a little bit twice as high on the Madison County side as on the Gallatin County side. In terms of second homes, you can see district-wide, it's about 6.1 million, but much lower on the Gallatin County side when compared to the Madison County side, which I'm assuming will track with, hopefully will track with your practical understanding living in this community, just given some of the private clubs on the Gallatin County or Madison County side of the border as well. So, and just kind of back to that point, the reason I went on the rant about the data, we wanted to be able to say exactly how much of a share of taxable value or property taxes are paid by primary residents versus vacationers or second homeowners, but we weren't able to do that just because our sample was too small. We're gonna keep digging in on that, if we can, just because we think that might be of interest to the community. But hopefully this gives you a sense of kind of some of the numbers. So that's property taxes. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about about resort taxes. So resort taxes have also grown tremendously in Big Sky. They've grown by an average of 10% annually over the lifetime of the tax. Although if I were really being a math nerd, I probably would look at the median growth here because a lot of that growth has happened in the last 10 years. So, but again, it's a really tremendous revenue stream and one that's really unlike most resort areas, at least that I've worked in. I worked in Teton County, Idaho, right outside of the Grand Targhee Resort, and they would have loved to have a resort tax to kind of capture some of that economic activity that's happening there. So you can see here, 1.2 million of first full year collections, up to 15.4 million without the 1%. I have in the chart in the in the report, we have a chart that shows this index to inflation. It's just, really outperforming any average basket of goods. We're still working on maybe a luxury basket of goods to see if it's also outperforming there. But we think it's mostly due to the kind of volume and nature of sales in the last 5 years that have really driven a lot of that growth. And then this is a chart showing the last 5 or 6 years of resort tax revenues and sort of the geographic split. So we went from a 70-30 split, Madison County driving most of the revenue in 2019, and it's getting a little bit more even with a lot of that development that's occurring on the Gallatin County side of the line, Gallatin side of the county line, excuse me. And then this is a look at the resort tax generation by sector. So you can really see that the tourism industry is really driving most of the revenue here. Although I saw you all contributing to the resort tax out the bar there. I think most of it comes from people who are visiting. So we talked a little bit about how resort taxes or where resort taxes come from. Now we're going to pivot and talk a little bit about where they're going. So for our study, we kind of divided we took the BizRat allocation data and we divided it into 3 categories. So you have your public entities that are receiving funds. A couple of them are in the room tonight. I see the Water Sewer District, the Sheriff. A lot of those are funded through intergovernmental agreements, sort of your typical public entity to public entity relationship. Then you have your nonprofit recipients, and those are listed there. And a lot of those are maybe your kind of a more traditional, like grant-making philanthropic relationship where they, with the roles they play in the community, are not typically seen in the public sector in an incorporated government. But then we have this kind of third category that we're calling public function or public-like function. And I think this is one of the things that makes the resort tax so interesting and has really allowed Big Sky to be different than other unincorporated areas that I've worked in. I think that we see that there's groups like the Big Sky Community Library, the Housing Trust. Leanne's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The community organization and others that have stepped in and allowed this area to invest locally, like we talked about, where property taxes are kind of going out of the area, the resort tax is allowing investment locally, and it's really allowing for services that are above and beyond what you might typically see in an unincorporated area. Just given the nature of the need here and the ability of this revenue to kind of meet some of that need. And so we took a look at the last 5 years of data, just kind of seeing how the growth has, how the revenues have, the allocations have changed among these categories. And, have the percent listed here, the percent increase. You can see that public function or public-like function, community service function, whatever you want to call it, has really seen the most dramatic growth in the last 5 years. So I think that's just, something that should be of interest as you're thinking about potential changes to government structure. Okay.
In the eye from you, so it's okay. It's gonna take too long, sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
All right, so this table provides a high-level fiscal overview of some of the select service providers that we use in our analysis operating in the Big Sky area. This kind of helps us illustrate the diversity of revenue streams and shows the role of both property tax and resort tax kind of at play here. So the top row here shows the resort tax allocation for each of these service providers that they received in fiscal year or that they budgeted for in fiscal year 2025. And the second row shows the property taxes collected by each if they're collecting property tax. And some of these categories below then include grants, philanthropy dollars, county dollars, user fees, so kind of a mix of other revenue streams. I'll do us a favor tonight and not go through this entire table. I don't know if anyone's had enough to drink for that. But I will highlight a couple, and I do want to note that these are the numbers that came directly from the application materials from the service providers when they were looking for their resort tax allocation. So Big Sky Fire is the first column there. Sorry, the color is not great on this screen. But squarely a public service providers, that first column here budgeted for $1.2 million in resort allocation in 2025, which is just under 10% of their total revenue. And then so most of their revenues come from property taxes, which is typical. So about 9.5 million there, or just about 77% of their property tax. The other one we want to highlight is Big Sky Housing Trust, who we've categorized as kind of this public-like service provider. Since we do often see housing trusts operating at a municipal or even regional level of government. So here in Big Sky, it's operating as a local nonprofit, but fulfilling that very like public need for affordable housing. So in fiscal year 2025, they budgeted for $2 million of resort allocation and for about 65% of their revenue. And then about the other third is a mix of different grants and fundraising efforts. So yeah, I think we'll keep it there for now. I'll turn it back over to Dylan.
Okay, I think we're gonna pivot a little bit. Don't you love that word, pivot? Because we talked about how important engagement is, I'm going to mix up the agenda a little bit and allow for Q&A right now before we get into what Dylan has to present next. What he's gonna present next is I'm gonna summarize it as sort of as what's next to come, but what just went on here is a whole lot of info, and I think it's important to pass that mic around. Who wants to ask a question? And remember, we do have people on Zoom and we'll take some there. We're gonna ask you to announce your name in the microphone and speak loudly. Anybody? Seth, are you coming up?
Oh, man, you know, I'm crossing the old man.
Thank you for being here.
My name is Seth Ryan. Yes, that is loud, it sounds like. I would wonder about, and this goes to the sheriff back here, he probably would know more than I would. If we incorporated, would we still have a sheriff's department or would we have to have a municipality?
Hi, Ted, thanks for the question. Yeah, so generally speaking, it depends on what you want, I guess. So if you incorporate, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go down one path or another. There's plenty of incorporated towns, but I'm sure the sheriff will tell you that they provide police services too. So it's not if this then that question. It's more of a, if you incorporated, do you want the sheriff to provide police protection, or would you rather have a municipal police department? I guess would be the question. So yeah, we'll get into the next kind of section. It talks about some state statute constraints and some considerations for structure of local government that way. So hopefully I'll answer that a little bit better, you know, in some of the slides too, but thank you for the question. That's helpful.
Okay. Sam, thanks for being here.
Generalize how much tax revenues are going to each county And like, we also had an analysis of how much resort tax district, trying to figure out how much is actually coming back to Big Sky in those generations.
I was hoping nobody would ask that question, because it's really a good question. So I can tell you I can tell you our estimate of how much is paid, in total, I guess actually including the state levy. So in total, there's about 70 million collected on the Madison County side, of by districts that levy within Big Sky. So there might be some districts outside of Big Sky that we didn't include them in our analysis. And our estimate is that 59 million are paid by the Big Sky property owners, so 59 of the 70. In terms of, and then on the Gallatin County side, it's about 33 million, 33 million total that are paid by Big Sky owners. The number is much higher for how much is collected, but it's about, it's about 33 million is 14% of whatever they collect. But in terms of what's spent back here, that's a lot harder to calculate. On the Madison County side, I am not aware, although I would love to be corrected, of services within this area other than county, directly in this area other than maybe county road maintenance. There might be, I'm not sure, I would love to hear from you all if there are other county services that you access especially if you're a Madison County resident. And then on the Gallatin County side, it's a little bit more straightforward, and the previous question was just about the sheriff. It's relatively easy to say that the sheriff costs, what is it, $1.9 million a year. It's paid through an intergovernmental agreement with resort tax, property taxes from Madison County and property taxes from Gallatin County. And so it's kind of easy to say, like, give a rough estimate of how much is then redeployed back here. But I would say it's really hard to do that with other county services, like how do you estimate how much of a coroner's time you'll ever use in your lifetime? It's a very hard calculus. But I would say with like 99% confidence you spend more in taxes than you get back.
Generalized plot, we have 115 million, and we pay off whatever.
Yeah, well, it'll be about 90, 60 plus 30 that are paid.
But you're gonna include the resort tax.
Oh, and then the resort tax is 20 million. I don't know how much, that's kind of the opposite. The resort tax is like easy to see where it's spent, but it's much harder to say who's paying it. We can kind of look at it a couple different ways to figure out where the dollars are coming from, but it's really hard to say with any degree of certainty, like how much is paid by people who live in Big Sky versus those who are coming to vacation here. I would say probably the latter, just given the nature of the purchases, but we don't have the data to do that analysis.
You would agree that that's a revenue smoother for the, our taxes, I guess?
I do, yeah, I think there's a little more nuance in the report, but I think it's a great balancer for property taxes for a number of reasons. I mean, one is just the growth, I mentioned it's a 10% growth. I don't think we can expect that going forward, although I would love to be wrong. But it certainly is gonna grow a lot faster than property taxes, which are limited in state statutes, so that half the rate of inflation plus new construction or whatever it is, just very, very limited. It also is a good balancer in that it's capturing revenue from people who are visiting and not from people who actually own property. There's a lot of ways that from like a geeky tax perspective and a public finance perspective, they're really great partners.
So if we were to start a new government, we have about 115 million that all never.
That would be really cool, but unfortunately, I don't think that would be the way it would work. Unless, I think. There are all of those taxes, and this is another good point that I didn't, make clearly enough, but when we were looking at the levies, all the different districts, a lot of those districts are much, much bigger than Big Sky. A lot of them are much smaller. They are all different governments, so they're not all one entity that's getting them. You probably know if you're a taxpayer, if you're a property taxpayer, you have a lot of different lines, and all those little lines are going to different entities. So it would be wonderful if that were the case, but I don't think that's gonna be the baseline, for one new government.
Good question, Sam, thank you. We can stay on this Q&A a little bit longer if it feels like the right thing to do. Otherwise, we gotta listen to Dylan talk some more. What do you think? Go Dylan. All right, Dylan, it's all yours. And please excuse us if we do extend a little bit longer than our regimented agenda. We're really trying to cram a lot in here and we don't wanna cut Dylan off, we don't wanna cut this team off, and we don't especially wanna cut you off, so maybe we'll go a little extra, maybe we'll be here till 7:15 or 7:30. Thank you. Go for it, Dylan.
Thanks, sorry, I'm gonna stand back up, I like to make eye contact with all the people that are staring at me, so. Yeah, we're gonna keep going to the next section, we're gonna talk about is some government structure considerations. So what we've done so far is I talked about some service providers, and I went through that pretty quick. Because what we found when we were doing that was an internal exercise, we needed to understand how the gears of Big Sky operate and how they all mesh together. And we found that it's pretty well understood throughout the community, so I did rush through that pretty quick. Sarah and Leanne kind of went through the fiscal stuff, and that's, I think that most of the people here probably had an inkling of the findings that they have. And they put, pen to paper and got some numbers in. Those are cold hard facts where they got their data from, so hopefully that's something new. It's probably not anything that you didn't expect to see, but then you actually have numbers for it. And now we're gonna talk about some different types of governance structures compared to what you have now, and just some considerations based around them. We're gonna stay on the slide for a while. I got a lot of notes. These are some of the considerations and some of the governance structures that we analyzed in the existing conditions report, and we're gonna use as a baseline for making some decisions in the final report. We'll talk about some considerations for incorporation first. These are in no particular order, by the way. Just kind of, they're actually laid out in the same order that they're in state statute. Incorporation, there's some considerations that you need to think about. We've talked about them a lot in previous engagements, a lot in the Tuesday series. We had this big poster that kind of showed where density was and where people live in Big Sky, permanent residents in Big Sky, because density, population and density is a consideration for incorporation. Current state statute requires that a municipality have at least 300 inhabitants, which is not a problem. But they also need to have 200 residents per square mile. We've talked about in several of the other engagements of kind of why we think that is the way that it is and where that number came from. It is a hard and fast rule. It is because it's in state statute, but that doesn't necessarily mean that limits the success of a municipality. But the reason for that is so that a town or a city has enough density to be able to self-sustain. A tidbit that I thought I would throw in here because of some recent happenings in Big Sky is that a prerequisite for incorporation is you need to have a federal facility such as the post office.
Oh, yeah, I would love that.
And some other things to consider, kind of the steps for incorporation is it starts with a petition, and that petition, is signed by at least 300 registered voters in the area. And then if you get that 300, it triggers a census. So those population estimates that we did based off of the 2020 census, that petition would trigger an actual census, door-to-door census, figure out how many people are in this proposed area. And then it's a vote. And with that, if you were to incorporate as a municipality, you start with the basic form of government. You get some town council members, and they're your legislative branch, they're the government function. And from there, state statute lists a bunch of alternate forms of government that get increasingly more complicated from just having some town council. Those include a commission executive form where you have a elected town council, an elected chief executive officer. You have a commissioner manager form where you have an elected town council and an appointed city manager. It's appointed by the town council. You have just the commission. There's several commission options where the commission picks a leader and they're kind of the mayor. Or they just divvy up executive branch functions between the commissioners. There's a town meeting forum where everybody gets together once a year and decides the laws for that year. It's getting big getting an annex, getting a gymnasium, and then hash it out for the year. And then probably the most common and the most viable is a charter form, and that's where you get self-governing powers, and you basically create like your own articles of incorporation like a company would. And you choose your own form of government that way, and then you have ability to have say in things that are outside that, it's just strictly allowed by state law. So that's kind of the process for incorporation and kind of the available options. When we talk about moving a county boundary or annexing portions of Big Sky into one of the two existing counties. That process is similar. It starts with a petition, and then there's a public hearing aspect of it, and that's held by the commissioners of both counties. And then if that goes forward and you decide to do that, then you gotta start getting interlocal agreements of who's gonna provide services and things like that, kind of like what you've already done here. And then there's an election requirement, and that requirement can be a bugger. It's the counties must agree to let you go, so you would have to have a popular vote election in both counties. One saying you can go to the other side, the other saying we accept you. I'm gonna kind of skip the consolidating city county. That's would be a step that would be after either making a city or a county. We're gonna talk about creating a county requirements. It's very similar to the moving county line requirements. Apologize if I'm doing this very fast. This is about 2,500 pages of Montana code annotated, just so you know. In the existing conditions report, I got it down to a solid 30 or 40 or something like that. And I'm giving you the kind of the quick version here, but I think it's important for people to know and understand the process of what's currently allowed by state law, because there may be some hurdles, there's some availability for some benefits also for sure. Especially when you look at some of the fiscal data. But, so they're creating a county, there's a petition requirement there, you need 50% of all qualified electors to sign that petition. Again, you have public hearings for both counties, and then the county commissioners in both counties have to pass a resolution for the new county. And then there's election requirement, that's just election people that are inside the boundary of the proposed county. After the counties pass the resolution. Some considerations, there's numbers that are outlined in state statute that are kind of important. And that's cannot reduce the county assessed valuation less than 12 million. The new county cannot contain an assessed value of less than 10 million. Cannot reduce the area of the existing county to less than 500 square miles, exclusive of national forest land. And then a new county requires, and this is similar to that density requirement for a corporation, a new county requires 250 square miles of surveyed land exclusive of national forest land not open for settlement. So you need 250 square miles developable. And then, interesting enough, a county needs a county seat, which has to be a town. Probably not gonna talk too much about additional service districts. There's one thing that Big Sky can do is provide service and create a service district. I think most people are probably pretty aware of how those function. Most people in this room probably work with one in some form or fashion. There are some changes to the current form of government. I think everybody's aware that both Madison and Gallatin counties have elected to study their current form of government as their current county form of government. There's some options that are allowed by current state statute that would, possibly benefit some of the representation aspect of Big Sky. And that's things like creating community councils where council members have advisory councils that are from Big Sky. You could look at districting of commissioners. Your commissioners are districted now, but they're elected at large. And another interesting suggestion that I just recently heard that is allowed is what I mentioned, the charter form of government for an incorporated municipality. Counties can also have charter forms of government. They can define powers in certain areas and give certain areas other powers through their charter. That would take a coordinated effort, probably with both counties, but it would possibly give some answers to some of the representation sections. So that's that's 2,500 pages of Montana code in a nutshell. We talked about this a little bit in the scenario development toolkit thing, and I'm hoping that people are downloading that tool and using it and understanding some of the options and some of the broad outcomes for that, because that is really there to lead into the survey. So tying this all together, the whole study is, we took some time, we learned how services are provided in Big Sky, and that was a lot for us. So as a consultant team to understand how those cogs in Big Sky turn. The ECHO team dove into, all right, we're hearing all this about taxes and where we spend. Let's dig up the numbers and find out what's going on. And I think they, for the most part, kind of confirmed what everybody understood to begin with. WGM dove into Montana code and just the depths of local government, all the options available and all the things that you can do. And now we need to talk about picking some scenarios for the final report that are going to resonate with everybody. So we've got the toolkit that's still available on the website that everybody can play with, and we're officially launching the survey now. It's got a bunch of in-depth questions that we hope to learn about some goals and objectives, and rank some opinions of the different options and stuff that we gave you. You know, we want to know what matters more. Level of property taxes versus representation, and just really try to gauge where the community is so that we can start narrowing down some scenarios that are going to be meaningful to people, and then run the numbers on those and tell you, in this scenario, this is how you do it. This is allowed. This is kind of an implementation. And this is how much it's going to cost. And this is what it does to the current people that are providing services in the community. So the survey, we're going to leave up on the website for probably the month of February. I'm probably going to leave it up for the month of February. We're hoping that everybody takes it. And it's not just scan this QR code with your phone and just take it right now. I'm hoping that everybody puts a lot of thought into it. I tried to stop you with some questions, and we'll see if you really think about it, provide some detailed answers, and then we're going to go back in a couple of months with some example scenarios and then figure out which one we're going to run the numbers on. Yeah, that when we first started and we spent a lot of time talking with folks, you know, a lot of community members had a solid idea of what they thought that their future governance should look like. When I was asking questions and I was communicating with people, I kind of wanted to understand the problem, not the answer. So when I'd ask people what they thought, they would give me the answer. They would say, we need to be incorporated, or we need to create a county, or we need to do this. And to me, that's answers. And I wanted to better understand the problem so that we can help you make sure that the answer that you have in your head is actually what's right for the community, and that make sure that everybody's understanding the questions that are before them. So that survey is intended to do that. It's intended to think about it, use it in context with the scenario toolkit, and then we'll get back together and figure out some scenarios. We're looking at another public meeting in March, and that's kind of where we're going to start narrowing down scenarios, so that ECHO's got a lot of math to do, scenarios, and figure out and tell you exactly what each scenario needs.
Thank you, Dylan. Well, we're not too far off schedule. We are now open for questions. We'll go for about 12 minutes, and then we'll see how everybody's doing. And then we'll go from there. And Mr. Delzer, what took you so long?
I want to get questions here. So do we meet the 200 people per square mile requirement for an incorporation? Have you studied that part?
Yeah, Jim, so there's quite a few areas that actually meet that, and Town Center, Meadow Village is actually significantly over that in 2026.
Someone's gonna get up and have a beer in a second.
Doing is, that's like a legislative checkbox, right? I'm sorry, I don't feel so comfortable speaking, but, you could take that, like say around Town Center, there's 1,000 people per square mile. You could take that out for 5 miles or whatever, right, and beat that 200 people per square mile. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna efficiently serve those residents with services with that municipality. So take that number with a grain of salt, that is a legislative check, that is something that you need to have, or you need to change that state law. But it's not necessarily saying that just because you meet that, that you're gonna be able to efficiently provide services to those residents.
Then the next one, square mile requirement for a new county. You need that.
Yeah, you're significantly under the 250.
And the last thing is the incorporation, you know, we have covered it in some way, but the incorporation between two counties, what are we running into?
Yeah, so there's an attorney general's opinion that you can incorporate across county lines. You can annex across county lines. Those are what they are opinions. That's not really how statute is written, or it specifically says that you can do that. But from our understanding at this time period, you can incorporate across the county. One thing to understand with the fiscal stuff here too, and that question is that, and the question in the back kind of relates to that too. So I want to mention that is, if you are to create a municipality, that doesn't replace the current assessments from the county from a tax perspective. While they may reduce some of their services, it's another taxing entity. It's on top of a county taxes. So anybody that lives in Bozeman pays county taxes and Bozeman taxes. City of Bozeman taxes, just so everybody's aware.
Hi, Linda Martinez. My husband and I have been here 4 years. Part-time residents, I apologize, but the grandchildren were kidnapped and moved here. And our other home for 38 years is Sedona, Arizona. We've been there 38 years. And 35 years ago, I was on the steering committee to incorporate Sedona, which is spread over 2 counties. And you can incorporate in Arizona, of course, over 2 counties. And I was listening to what you said, because we've been able to watch our community unfold now as a city over 35 years. I've been on the Housing Commission. We're both strong advocates and have a grassroots committee about workforce housing. We've created nothing, sadly, because once you are incorporated, and I'm not saying I'm against incorporation, there are just some questions to ask. And I was just wondering, I haven't been on the study yet or the survey yet. And I hope that it's not about just this is what your options are, but why. And be sure that you're clear about what as a community we want to accomplish that we can't do now. Our budget used to be 30 to 40 million, it's now 106 million. Our population used to be 10,400 people. We've now lost population and we're at 9,600. We're at almost 20% of our homes that are short-term rentals, because like Big Sky, everybody wants to come to the jewel of the state. And it used to be, we had 2 seasons, now it's year round. We've seen our workers, our school districts used to have 1,500 children, and our kids had options like we do here, went through the schools. Now we're at 800 in our community. We've lost young families, we've lost workers. And who's moving in now are people who can afford our median priced homes. We're less than Big Sky, but it's about $1 million. So these people are coming in with money, most retired. And the attitude went from, oh, this used to be a working class town, to I got mine, I made it, I can afford to live here. No, I don't feel an obligation to help our workers. So it's a huge challenge, because when you're incorporated, the city belongs to everybody. So the city is spending more money now trying to buy up small parcels of land to build workforce housing, and there's a fight on everything. So that's what I wanted to say. When I look at the the cooperation in Big Sky between the housing trust, between I love the way you describe the entity of what the Big Sky Housing Trust is. Working with, the development company, you're able to produce homes. We're not able to do that at this point. Most that the city can do is to buy this property and then just work it through year after year. Our last parcel was 40 acres. We can get 400 units on that. There are many people in favor of it, but we've got a small vocal group of maybe 200 or 300 that want to put in an outdoor music amphitheater. It could be used about 10 times a year, because we used to have them. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but my question was, please just be aware of what you want to accomplish.
Look at this resource we have. Thank you. Thank you, and there wasn't a question in there? We might have questions for you. Thank you, and I hope you signed in, I'll be in touch. Okay, who's next?
Has there been any of the previous annexations from the other counties, like you researched and like, you know, like why would these counties want to give up their golden gooses, like 15% in one county of the budget, 85 of another?
That's a good question. I haven't found any similar circumstances to Big Sky really anywhere. We're, you know, talking with some other resort tax towns. Echo's got some relationships with some other communities. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of the last time. I don't know when the last time the county line was moved and then how that happened. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have the answer for you or what we would, how you would present that.
With the 250 miles radius or whatever square miles, like we can't form another county, that's off the table then.
So that according to the current state statute, and the reason for that, the best I can tell, the reason for that requirement is just a little tidbit about municipal governments and their funding is that or local governments and their funding, it's there's a bill cap. You have to have developable land to sustain. Communities aren't growing, they're dying, basically. So that 250 square miles of developable land, I think that Big Sky currently is less than half of that. So that doesn't meet the current state statute. But then again, that doesn't mean that, you know, that it's off the table.
Is that the BizRad boundaries? Like, what's the biggest boundary that we currently have, BizRad?
Yeah, it is. And BizRad contains a lot of national forest land, and it's like kind of squared up and stuff like that. So basically, that 250 square miles needs to be privately held ground. So just think of the mountain all the way down to the canyon, just kind of the swath. It's kind of the elongated thing down the road, right? And once you get so far away from the road, it's all national forest. So it has to be updated.
Next question we'll take from Sarah Blechta and then Tom Butler, and then we'll go to Jim.
Dylan, you're gonna love this question. Do you have a prize figured out for the person who comes to the most number of these meetings? Because I've seen a lot of people at these meetings and I'm really impressed with the community engagement. I know that I've been asking for this for quite some time as we've been talking about this and asking people to be engaged in BizRad activities. So if you don't have a prize yet, you should really think about it.
Yeah, what do you guys want? I can pick out a few things.
And one of the things they'll have to know is a tidbit about Dylan.
Everyone's like to work here.
Okay, Tom Butler.
Specific to the moving of the county lines, does the county you want to leave as an entire county have to vote that it's okay for you to leave, or just the people in the piece of the county that wants to leave that county?
You're talking about creating a new county?
No, if you want to move the county line.
If you want to move the county line, both counties, it's a county-wide bonding vote.
Okay, that's not gonna happen.
Oh, Tom's leaving now.
Is that all the public comment?
No, we have Chief Dustin, and then we've got one from Seth, and we'll have some up in the front also.
Well, But I just want to get back to the incorporation piece and the density requirements that you're talking about, just for further understanding on that, so. When if you have gaps in that density requirement, does the incorporation boundary stop at those gaps? Or can you go over those gaps to pick up other densities that you might have?
Yeah, that's a great question. For one, an incorporated municipality has to be contiguous. So you can't have separate areas, but that 200 people per square mile is an average. So if you have 300. Both. Like I said, you can extrapolate that out down to the 200.
That's based on census data.
Yeah, so if you were to petition to create a municipality, they take a door-to-door census. We are just using the 2020 census, that's the most available data now, and obviously that's changed in the last 5 years, but gives you a good idea where.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Seth.
According to Montana Anointed 409, it is, you have to have a steeple in order to become a city.
Is that a question? I'll look it up.
No, that's just like, that's what I've heard and known, is in order to be called a city, you have to have a steeple. So would the Soldiers Chapel and the church be considered a steeple?
Nice, Seth. That's
I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'm not aware that you need a steeple, but I might have missed that in the 2,500 pages. It's been very, very easily done, and yeah, the difference between a church and a steeple, like, are we still doing the, here's the church, here's the steeple?
one more here, go ahead.
I'm curious, so I'll look it up, thanks, Senator.
Ron Martinez. In looking at the funding model and the costs, it looked, pretty much where fundraising and the money, the income has been reasonably covering, even to the point some of those public options that were up there. My question, because you brought it to my mind when you said, if in fact in the incorporation model, then to fund this new infrastructure, personnel, et cetera, it may be like Bozeman, there would be an additional taxing entity, which would be the city, which would essentially fund that new infrastructure or personnel, et cetera, that would be in place.
Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable to assume that,
Or some bonding, maybe.
yeah, when we pick scenarios, and if incorporation is one of those scenarios, to run the numbers of that, we'd have to, the scenario would include this incorporation, this structure of municipal government, it's gonna provide this services, we're gonna assume this number of employees, and so much it would cost.
There might be like an absorption of the service. There could conceivably be a scenario where it's for some governance that you would assume would go away, and so there might be like a net, the net cost would not be just kind of stacked, so we could kind of include that in the scenario analysis too.
Yeah, that's great to point out, Sarah, you may be providing services with a municipal government, somebody else is doing, so you're just shifting the cost and not necessarily creating.
I just have one more comment, as we were talking earlier about the county study commissions. I'm on the Madison County Study Commission. And the redistricting, like if you were to go from a 3 commissioner to a 5 commissioner, you were looking at that. And something that's interesting, I thought it was pretty easy, like, oh yeah, just go from 3 to 5. What we're finding is that actually if you go to 5, you have to have equal population and equal land mass in those. And so when you look at, representation from up here, going from 3 to a 5 commissioner to get representation up here. In order to get that population and land size, you still have to bring it down and encompass Florida and Venice into that. And so I know that's something that we're looking at as a study commission, but it's kind of interesting as I've gotten into that to know if that is something you have to take into consideration.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about with the redistricting of commissioners. And they naturally redistrict, right? Like every time there's a census, they have to adjust. So a commissioner represents the same amount of folks in that county. What I was gonna ask you is, how is Madison County's commissioners, are they elected at large? Or do they have to be elected from their district, Is Gallup County at large?
Okay, another question over here. No, are you on? Hi, I'm Jolene Romney, and I just have sort of a basic question regarding this scenario development toolkit. What I can tell from this presentation, this is my first, is fiscally, it looks like we're getting a lot of taxation without representation. And I'm wondering if there's going to be some scenarios that look into how we can change that alone without looking into corporation necessarily. And whether that involves going to the state legislature, judiciary, whatever that might be. Because from what I can see, we're not gonna have either of our counties want to give up any of that money. And so I'm wondering if there's some way, other way we can think about that.
And that's a great pivot. I'm gonna hijack the mic. This is Andy Mearsfall with BizRad. That's a wonderful question. And if, we've had a fascinating civics lesson here in the Wilson, and to expand upon the civics lesson, the 2025 legislative session is currently underway. I'm gonna give a PSA and a thank you to WGM Group, MO2 and Eco Northwest. You guys have been fantastic to work with and trying to understand a very complicated community, and you're really thinking about this and trying to get us a report at the end of the day that has meaningful content that our community can actually make an informed decision. So thank you. I appreciate everyone in the room's participation in this process. If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet right back here, I am asking you to do so, and I'm gonna hijack your sign-up sheet as well as this mic. Put a star next to your name if you would like to learn more about LC 3227, which is a special district boundary bill that is currently in the process of moving forward into the legislative session for this year. And what it does is addresses some of the special districts that were not necessarily dove into as a consideration for future government, but rather taking a position on moving forward with services that are being taxed and representation that without access to those services as a result of a geographical boundary challenge, which we have here in Big Sky with one road in, one road out. In addition to that, we have 20+ students that are sending students to school on the Madison side. So there's a voter representation challenge that exists in Big Sky as well. So small civics lesson on some special purpose districts. I would ask everyone to sign the sign-in sheet. Put a little star next to your name if you want us to reach out to you and learn more about this bill and how you can help. I'll just leave it at that so I don't hijack the mic anymore. But
Danny, thank you for hijacking that part, but if you hijack my article, we're gonna have to have some. I'm looking right at Jack. So there is so much going on here. Any more questions? We don't have anybody on Zoom asking. Let's give them a reminder. Raise your hand and unmute yourself if you have a question. Anybody else in the room?
And just to say, I didn't have anything else to add to what Danny said. That's what you would need to do, would be to talk to legislation change.
Jolene, that is one of the top pieces of feedback that we get is taxation without representation. And so it's going to be noted when the reports are out. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a great way to think about it, just looking at that individually. Board Member Young.
Hello. My question is not from a board perspective, but from a human perspective, as you have been looking at our community from the outside. What do you see, and what are our challenges, and how do we fix them without, if it's not incorporation, what is it? How do we do it? How do we do it better? For all of us in this room and for all of us in our community.
Yeah, go. That's it.
Just quick remind everybody that, I've been very clear with the WGM group that they are not to provide opinions in this report. This is really meant to be an unbiased, and factual based process. So they will not ever in the study give us what we should do. But as a team, you're welcome to kind of say what you've been seeing and things like that. But I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that we were really clear in our RFP and in our desire to have an unbiased, not opinion, but fact only. Sorry, Grace.
That's what I was gonna say. It is in part what I was going to say, which is that, you know, for me, looking at this community just from the fiscal perspective, I said it during my presentation, I mean, the resort tax is really unique to this area. So I mentioned Teton County. I've also done a lot of work in coastal Oregon communities. And Oregon, most communities don't have a local sales tax. It is legal there. A lot of people think it's illegal. It's not. It's just incredibly unpopular. So these towns that have tremendous swells of visitors, just like Big Sky does, have all the housing, you know, shortages and challenges that you mentioned in Sedona, like these tourism destination areas. Most of the ones that we're asked to work in, it's because they don't have a resort tax, and so they can't fill in gaps. So I'll mention that, and then Leanne has something to say about housing, but the one thing I did think we heard a little bit about when we were talking to service providers when we came in September, talking to community members, it's just a little bit more coordination. I mean, everybody knows who's providing their services, but it is multiple entities. I think roads were mentioned as an area where I think people were hoping for a little bit more coordination just in terms of whose responsibility roads were. I don't know that, I can't say with any certainty that an incorporated community would make that better. I think I live in a city and I think the same thing about some of the areas right outside. But that is one area, and the other one would be, I think, solid waste collection was mentioned as an area where there might be some needs, but the resort tax really does fill a lot of holes here.
Yeah, briefly, I mean, from our, you know, opinion standpoint, not going into the report, but, you know, we've worked in LA, San Francisco, Seattle, even small towns, island communities in Washington. The amount of units that you are able to get on the ground in a year period with, you know, a resort tax is pretty incredible. I don't know if, you know, at this point in the study, if more policy options are available to you under incorporation from the housing standpoint or the mental health, you know, work that's going on here too. But I will say, just from an outsider's perspective, incredibly scrappy community. It's done efficiently, but you know, it's all worth looking at, you know, from a policy standpoint of if you can do more, you know, in other ways.
And there has been a healthy amount of feedback about volunteer fatigue. That scrappiness that this community has depends on, as you mentioned in Sedona, a small amount of the population and thinking about the future. We have been in front of leadership Big Sky several times, and I look to them for our great hope.
Yeah, just to add to that human aspect, I would say what I learned and mentioned about the folks that make this community operate, a lot of it is, you know, a lot of highly driven, well-educated and tenacious folks here that seem to get things done. So my opinion is no matter what option you choose, you'll probably be successful. Some may be more successful than others, but that is the key to the success is you got people that put your heads down and just get stuff done. I was really impressed with, I mean, you provide a lot of services now, volunteer hours, a lot of volunteer hours. It just shows that there's a big care. I mean, you see the number of people in this room, there's a big care in this community. So hopefully we'll give you some facts so you can choose the right option that's good for you. But no matter what you choose, my guess is that you'll be successful.
It's feeling like the Q&A is winding down. Is that okay with everybody? Oh. All right.
All right. How do you go? All right, the vote started then.
Hello?
Of this. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Most of us feel like we're sending money to the county seat and it's not coming back.
Well, as we learned, we're probably still gonna pay money to the county. And then we're gonna have to pay money to run our own governments. So chances are the taxes aren't going to go down, they're just gonna go to a different place. My problem at being in construction for decades is that I don't see the building codes being observed. And I see developers running rampant, and they're good people, but they see a chance to make a buck and they're gonna make a buck. So all we really need is more county enforcement, but we're not getting it. We don't need our own organization to kick the developers and the builders in the butt. And if you're a developer or builder, I'm not picking on you, but I see this happening. Because I've learned the building codes, I wrote building codes in Indiana. And I see blatant violations. So let's not go start a whole new organization because we've got a couple problems to solve. Let's identify the problems and work on them. I think the resort district does a great job of being our government. And 6 months ago, I was all in favor of splitting off both organizations and forming our own county and kicking them in and thumbing our nose to them. But I realized that's going to cause a lot more problems as well. So when you fill out the survey, please think about what you want to do and what problem you're trying to solve.
Thank you. Everyone have an appetite for breakout sessions? If you do,
One quick question. Do you know any other counties in Montana that have succeeded or moved into other counties?
That's a good question too, not in the recent past. So, no, the answer is no.
Okay, let's officially end this meeting with a big thanks to everybody in the room. The feedback was great, the dialogue was great. I hope you learned something. I know we sure did. We will be here. We'll split these tables and we'll do 10 minutes of 3 stations if you're interested. You want to get more details from the Echo team, they'll be right here. You want more details from Dylan, he'll be over here, and I'll be standing over there. So, and we'll announce the 10-minute rotation if you want to stick around. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And probably the same thing.